What kind of hunger makes you step past safe flags into 71 degrees Celsius, chasing a shape that could feed to villagers? Air rasped my throat to glass and stitched my lashes between blinks. The wind carried iron from the river mouth where blue cracks braided under snow. I set the spike and felt the answer in my glove-tight layers. Old ice. Trust for now. Beyond a pressure ridge, a dark back rolled once and sank as if the sea turned in sleep. I shouldered the harpoon I'd rebuilt by stovelight, checked the line for burrs, each not a promise, not a boast. The sled runner I'd splintered with bone creaked, then settled. My lead dog stamped and grew still, reading the cold better than I could. I counted breaths so the heart wouldn't run ahead of the feet. Then I entered the white noise and let the world narrow to three things: ice, tide, intent, new from frozen existence. 71 degrees Celsius on the Loktev coast, one shadow under the ice, two villagers waiting. Walk the ridge with me as skill wrestles cold, and see if preparation can bend the odds. If this world holds you, follow frozen existence and step onto the ice beside me. Home was heat contained, an iron stove ticking, birch and larch stacked by size, a kettle leaving thin frost ghosts on the lid. Felt boots hung over a line. Fish racks slept under snow like low fences. I checked the stores, counted oil, salt, kindling, noted how the seal fat had settled. The sled leaned against the wall with a new bone splint on the runner. I ran a bone needle through sealskin and closed a seam on my left boot. The harpoon socket wore a fresh rawhide binding. The line lay coiled in a wooden tub to keep its memory round. Outside, the village crouched behind drifts. Katabatic wind slid down from the Lena plateau and pressed the roofs flat. Shore-fast ice groaned at the tide cut, a long, quiet pressure more felt than heard. I read snow by sheen and shadow, marked the safe flags, and scratched a new one where the crust changed tone. The dogs ate lean and watched me measure the day. Steaks were simple. The storeroom was thin. Elders needed fat for lamps and joints. Children's coughs carried in the mornings. The trail to the next settlement crossed bad cracks. One catch would buy weeks of steadiness. Warm lamps, quiet bellies, time to mend everything before it failed. I wrote the list in my head, then shouldered the tools that could make it real. The old route had vanished under drift. I probed ahead with the spike and mapped a new line by tone. Dull meant crust, glassy meant danger. At the creek mouth, blue fractures braided like veins beneath milked ice. I laid the sled ropes wide, lightened the first runner, and stepped across with weight low, breath rationed to keep the chest calm. The lead dog stumbled. I checked his poss, swollen but clean slid on a hide booty, moved the load to spare him. Bear prints ringed the distant fish cache, pads stamped into hard snow, fresh enough to hold edges. I logged direction, wind, and time, then turned my body to keep scent small. Far out, a pressure ridge shifted with the tide, a quiet reminder that nothing here was finished. I tightened my hood, counted 20 slow breaths, and eased forward, lesson by lesson, until the ice accepted my plan. I worked the edge of the pressure ridge until the ice stopped speaking in riddles. Breathing holes stitched the flat like buttons, each rim lifted by whiskers and scuffed by tusk. I knelt and brushed frost with the back of a mitten, letting the surface show its traffic. Fresh glaze meant recent use. Old sugar crust meant the herd had shifted. The plan needed anchors, not wishes. I bored a hole with the auger, slow and steady so heat wouldn't crack the lip. From the sled, I hauled the 6-fluke hook I had forged from plough steel, wrapped in rawhide to keep it quiet against ice. The drag line paid out through my hands with a familiar lay, coils remembering their circle from the wooden tub. I set the hook on the far side of a hummock, then shuttled snow and cut blocks to build a low-wind wall. A second anchor went in deeper, belt high, to share strain. Waiting was its own work. I burned a stove tablet under a small tin to make weak tea, then saved the warmth by pouring it back into the cup twice. I counted a slow 100, then another. The tide turned, subtle at first, a breath under the ice. Dusk slid down the sky. A ribbon of green brushed the horizon, folded, and came again. My father had shown me leverage with a fence post and a wet log, hands on mine, weight quiet. The memory set my stance more than effort did. Water lifted in the nearest hole, a dark thumbprint swelling through skim. A small head surfaced, whiskers beaded, eyes black as pits in coal. I let the moment pass. Patience bought meat. Haste bought trouble. Farther out, something larger rolled, scarred hide catching a knife of light. The line in my glove grew heavier just from the idea of it, and I steadied my feet for the pull that would come. The swell in the far hole rose like a held breath released. A scarred back rolled, then the head cleared, whiskers, bristling eyes level with the world. I eased the line from the tub and felt its simple truth. Weight, water, will. The harpoon left my hand the way a good tool wants to travel straight, quiet, committed. The line jumped, paid out, and bit into my glove. Ice under my boots hummed. The bull plunged, towing the drag anchor and then the second. The first hummock shifted. My wind wall threw a curve of powder into the air. I moved 3 steps left, to back feeding slack to keep the lip from soaring the rope. The tide tugged crosswise, trying to tip everything into impatience. I circled an ice horn and snubbed the line, making friction my ally. The anchor found new purchase and held. A bear ghosted along the ridge, muzzle high to the scent. I kept the heavy line taut, cut the light tag free so nothing loose invited a chase, and set 2 spindrift stakes as a fence of suggestion. The bear watched, decided the math was wrong for today, and dwindled into weather. The bull surged again. I lowered my center, let the pull pass through spine to heel, and shifted the angle leverage, not contest. I drove the sled runner into a narrow crack and stamped it solid, a quiet dead man. The rope went from song to steady breath. Water at the hole trembled, then calmed. The ice under me relaxed back into silence. I stood with hands open on the line, counting heartbeats until the world forgot to resist. Steam drifted. The anchors stopped complaining. The weight at the other end settled into the decision I had asked of it. Around us, aurora braided and unbraided like slow muscle. I exhaled and looked back toward the flags, already measuring how many careful trips it would take to honor the work that brought me here. Work began with care and order. I set the line safe, steadied the sled, and cleared snow from the landing. The tide had eased. The ice lay calm. I marked shares with a cedar peg for each family, then covered the head and laid spruce boughs as a clean bench. Blade and bone tool did their quiet jobs. Nothing wasted, nothing rushed. I wrapped cuts in canvas, lashed bundles tight, and staged them by the flags for the relay. Headlamps grew along the ridge like small stars. Sleds arrived from both settlements, runners whispering over the crust. We lifted and handed, measured and tied, trading nods instead of words. Fat for lamps, meat for stews, hide for boots and lines, whiskers and bone for craft. The bear kept its distance, a shadow that decided to be wind. When the last bundle left the ice, I mended the dog's paw and rubbed warmth back into his toes. The anchors came free with a groan from the ice, a sound of work finished. On the return, the sky unrolled green and violet, and the trail felt shorter than it had any right to feel. Home breathed steady. The stove ticked, kettles steamed, and caches filled to the brim. I stacked one last arm of wood and wrote a small list for tomorrow. Sharpen, oil, stitch, thank. Outside, the wind softened. Inside, the world held